good morning. Coming to this second day of the satellite about convergence. And I call to the table the keynote, Nancy Gwynn, and Patricia overall, who is the chair of this section.
Buongiorno, come stanno? Molto bene? It's a pleasure to be able to introduce Dr. Nancy Gwynn. She has been with the Smithsonian since 1984 and became the director of the Smithsonian in 1997. She's a recognized leader in international librarianship, the preservation of library collections, and the application of library technologies. She is also a leader in building collaborations and partnerships, which is the topic of her talk this morning. At the Smithsonian, Dr. Gwynn has overseen the launching of Libraries exhibition program, the expansion of the library's rare book and electronic collections, the establishment of an active website and digital library, the creation of the first Libraries Advisory Board, and fundraising program to support the programs and services. Wow. During her tenure, the Smithsonian Libraries initiated and became the lead partner in establishing the Digital Biodiversity Heritage Library, and the library's houses and the staffs and program secretariat. She currently serves as chair of the Biodiversity Heritage Library, Members Council, and is the secretary of the Global Biodiversity Heritage Library Partnership. Dr. Gwynn recently completed a 6-year term on the International Federation of Library Associations Governing Board, including a 2-year term as chair of IFLA's Professional Committee. Currently, she is secretary of IFLA's Management and Marketing Sections and a member of the jury of the IFLA International Marketing Award. She is also a consultant to the IFLA Leadership Development Program. So it's a pleasure to introduce Dr. Gwynn.
Thank you, Patricia. I appreciate that, and I'm so pleased to be here. Buongiorno. That's the extent of my Italian. So I was very pleased to know that we were going to all be English speakers, or at least able to understand, and I'll do my best to help that along. Well, I really enjoyed the program yesterday, and I really appreciate all of you coming back today. I noticed that I was the only speaker today, so I thought perhaps you would think yesterday was the meat, which it definitely was, of the conference. And I learned a lot from what was going on yesterday. As you know, we're a little isolated in the United States, and sometimes we're not as aware as we should be of what's going on in Europe. And so whenever I come to these kinds of conferences, I probably learn more than I contribute. So as you heard, I'm the director of the Smithsonian Libraries, but I must emphasize that my remarks are not as an official of the Smithsonian. They're based on 30 years of personal observations, certainly the last 15 or so, watching how the 19 museums, and here's the main campus in Washington with the Smithsonian Castle building circled there. The 19 museums, 7 research centers, 20 libraries, and 13 or so archives have been meeting the challenges posed by our increasingly digital world. Needless to say, all of them have one foot firmly planted in the world of the physical object under the Smithsonian's mandate to both increase and preserve knowledge. I suspect that without the pressure of the need to ensure that our cultural institutions continue to enjoy strong support from society within the framework of the digital environment, we would not be having this conversation about LAM convergence or the collaborations that lead to it in the minds of the public. So what I want to focus on today is a transition in the attitudes or focus of Smithsonian staff in all three communities, but especially the museums, toward how we want to carry out our mission and how we want to relate to the public, a transition that might not have happened if it were not for the internet and digital technology. This transition is not uniform. It is taking place much more quickly or more slowly in different museums. There's just some of them. Depending on the leadership, the generational makeup and skill sets of staff, and especially the financial and technical resources available. And they're not uniform across the place. I characterize this as a movement from didacticism to crowdsourcing, from my teaching everything about an item to letting the user teach me, from pursuing a specific point of view to asking questions that might lead to a broader perspective or new insights. We know that digital technology and useful content helps give opportunities to those who are intellectually gifted wherever they are, if they have a viable internet connection. It also allows our staff, who are expert at helping users find what they need, apply those skills to the growing mass of information, and it helps them share this work. Through crowdsourcing, we can allow others to join with us in creating applications that provide creative tools for users to apply filters, analyze, organize, and present what they find in the digital world. Well, how has this transition played out? Now, here I must draw again from my personal observations of what's been happening in the Smithsonian to identify a few markers. Moreover, I'll talk mainly of museums. In our three-legged lamb stool, museums, with some exceptions, have not been able to participate as fully in the lamb cooperative for understandable reasons. Now, I may not be on entirely firm ground here because the Smithsonian is a 400-plus building, 6,000 employee organization, a huge, creative, and dispersed place where 1,000 flowers are blooming all the time, and it's impossible to know everything that is going on. A lot has happened since 1998, driven by the growth of digital infrastructures and expertise. Libraries entered this arena early because our experience with large-scale microfilming programs had already given us an understanding of the processes and workflows required, and our standards of description and shared cataloging ensured that we had most of the requisite metadata already at our fingertips. Library volumes are also standardized in size, so the profession moved quickly from in-house boutique scanning and presentation to the massive projects that you all know about coming through the collaborative efforts of libraries with Google and Microsoft, as well as other commercial efforts and vendors. It allowed multiple libraries to create digital libraries, such as our project, the Biodiversity Heritage Library, which is taking in digitized volumes from its 19 members and affiliates, plus other partners all over the world. Further, libraries have been used to open stacks, to presenting the collection and letting users decide on how to use the books and pursue their own topics. Thus, the idea of open access has come easier to us. Archives have also been able to move ahead in many ways, although they're still hampered by the multiplicity of formats in any given collection and the need for processing collections so they can be rationally accessed and used. Even with their professional differences in approaches, archives and libraries have always understood the power of combining books and primary resources to create powerful research repositories for investigation without being didactic. Museums have come from a different place, and it's taking time to catch up because the size and diversity of their collections. Art museums, such as the Metropolitan in New York, are perhaps more advanced as artworks are more two-dimensional. Material culture relies on three-dimensional objects and architecture to provide physical evidence of a culture, presenting them, through them, the relationship between people and their things, the making, history, preservation, and interpretation of objects. To be fully appreciated, physical objects must be placed in an interpretive context, drawing on science, history, folklore, and a range of other topics. And while a picture may be worth 1,000 words in a book, the original object has always been considered to be worth 1,000 pictures, certainly in the emotional responses they often evoke in the visitor. Nevertheless, there are millions of museum objects that will never see the lights in an exhibition case, but could be of equal or more value to an inquiring mind. Some museums have been pursuing greater exposure to collections by putting them in publicly accessible open view storage areas, such as the Luce Foundation Center for American Art in the Smithsonian American Art Museum, which has brought 3,000 items together, some without labels, some with minimal identifiers, for browsing by the public. Likewise, on the same floor is the Lunder Conservation Center, which opened in 2006 as the American Art Conservation Facility, first as the first American art conservation facility to allow visitors permanent behind-the-scenes views of crucial preservation work through floor-to-ceiling glass walls. Now you see open storage installations in many museums, including those in Italy. They enrich the experience of the museum visitor, but you have to go to the museum. Whoops. Oh well, I'll get there. I came to the Smithsonian in the early 1980s, not long after the first large optical discs came on the market, touted to hold 50,000 images. I don't know if you remember those. They were larger, they were about the size of a long-playing vinyl recording. The Smithsonian was also beginning the work of installing collection inventory systems, and the libraries was installing its first integrated library system. The mantra in the institution was, wouldn't it be wonderful if visitors could make one search and find everything in the Smithsonian collections related to the topic, no matter in which museum or library or archive it was located. At that time, the information would have been in the form of text-based records. But of course, as time and technology progressed, that became text and images together. And several of the Smithsonian's units began individually to combine images and textual data in collection inventory systems, although they were on separate servers and websites and required multiple lookups. The libraries and archives began the scanning projects that led manuscripts and whole books to be pushed out for virtual visitors' uses. This page here is one of our early efforts. The Natural History Museum began to scan some specimen collections, especially those on flat paper, like botanical specimens, with a view to sharing the images with other scientists around the world, a natural progression from a standard practice among museums of trading physical specimens among scientists for study and research. The National Museum of the American Indian was the first to make digital images of its entire collection as part of the process and the cost of moving the objects from New York City to Washington when the museum became part of the Smithsonian. Other museums were also working on this, but for those with large collections, progress has been slow. And the resulting images were still highly controlled, mostly for internal purposes, unless used by a curator for purposes of exhibition, publication, or other products. The operative word here was control, with great concern expressed, especially in the museums, about how images would be used if they were let loose. Nevertheless, as infrastructure systems and staff became more sophisticated, more was being done, and it became possible to consider creating a one-search virtual collection. Thus was born the Smithsonian's Collection Search Center, which now contains over 8.6 million catalog records of museum objects and library and archives materials. More than 1,200,000 of these records contain online images, video, and sound files, electronic journals, and other online resources. So, for example, if you enter a search on tigers, you will retrieve 7,414 items, of which 745 are online resources. So on this first screen, you will find 4 very different items. At the top is a terracotta sculpture of a tiger from the Smithsonian American Art Museum. Under that, from the National Air and Space Museum, is an insignia from a famous World War II Air Force squadron called the Flying Tigers. This was a volunteer flying force from the U.S., active in 1941-42, operating under the Chinese Air Force. Third is a postcard from Smithsonian Archives showing rare white tiger cubs. Now, if you were to go further, you'd find an 1886 cotton textile with a pattern showing tiger lilies and other flowers from the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum, and an 1856 scanned book in German from the Smithsonian Libraries concerning tigers, as well as a photo of one of our tigers at the National Zoo. Now on this slide, I've isolated the box that tells you all the types of objects that are described with the word tiger, while on this one, you can see the filters that can be applied to the search. The Collection Search Center was the first combined effort to share collections without regard to who was going to use them. Of course, it was still necessary to come to the Smithsonian site. Now, the winds of open access were blowing strong, and in 2006, a new Smithsonian secretary, which is the title of the institution's CEO, arrived with a priority on sharing the entire Smithsonian collection with the American people. He wasn't the only one in the nation to have such a huge vision. The Smithsonian's Collection Search Center became one of the models for an entirely new and successful initiative called the Digital Public Library of America. Europeana being the other. Emerging in 2010 from a call to arms issued by Robert Darnton, the eminent scholar who holds the title of University Librarian at Harvard, the DPLA is a grassroots operation and harvests metadata, now numbering 7,468,600 records, for digital objects from an increasingly broad swath of American libraries, archives, and museums, as you can see from this slide. In both examples, the Smithsonian Collection Search Center and the DPLA, however, the searcher who uncovers a desired item is sent back to the holding repository for the actual digital object. The individual repositories remain separate, however, collaborating in this enterprise, their records converging under a single search. Both sites allow for further tagging by the viewer. The Smithsonian became one of the first cultural institutions to contribute records for digital objects to the DPLA, but not every museum or repository, even those with images in the Collection Search Center, has been willing to push them out to yet another discovery tool, in some cases because of a feeling of loss of control, or perhaps the actual quality of the images that were there. Unlike the Collection Search Center, the DPLA is also a platform. The Application Programming Interface, or API, and open data available to software developers, researchers, and others to create educational, playful, and enabling applications, such as the cultural collage. So if I search on the word birds in the DPLA, I get 35,160 records. Instead of scrolling through them one by one, cultural collage allows me to bring just the images together for a quicker visual look. Like physical exhibitions, which can bring together objects from libraries, archives, and museums to tell a story, another form of convergence, DPLA allows for easy development of exhibitions, another example of a product built out of collaboration that allowed for convergence of collections. These are supposed to be black in the middle, but never mind. This is an exhibition that someone using the DPLA has put together. And it was interesting because it's one of the few that actually used an image of an object, in this case that vest, as part of the exhibition. Most of them are using photographs, other kinds of two-dimensional images of things rather than objects, because there really aren't that many objects out there. Among cultural institutions in the U.S., collaboration has come more easily to libraries, which have been practicing it for decades, and to a certain extent among archives. Natural history museums, which are the principal repositories for specimen collections, have, as I said, a tradition of sharing collections and information, often leading to collaboration on research about species identification and classification. It's come less easy to other kinds of museums, which have been hampered in many ways. Museums are often held back by a lack of fulsome metadata for individual objects in their collections. They may have an accession number in a record, for example, but little other descriptive information. For public use, seeing 100 images of Navajo baskets just labeled basket with an accession number may not be enough. The necessity of handling objects through the digitization process, getting them out of storage, making sure they can be handled, combining images with such information as may exist in other systems or even on paper, is obviously labor intensive. Historically, museums have been chronically understaffed and unable to devote significant resources to documenting or cataloging entire collections. Copyright issues affect everyone, but art museums in particular have more complicated and restrictive issues that may require considerably more investigation than for libraries or archives, at least in the US. But as some of us forged ahead a few years ago to send images to public sites such as Flickr to experiment with crowdsourcing without particular problems, and as Smithsonian administrators began to climb on the banner of open access, slowly museum staff became more comfortable with making more images publicly accessible, albeit with sometimes limited contextual information. And all of us have become more comfortable with asking our users what they're interested in and designing efforts to respond to that. A change from come see what we want to show you and teach you about to what would you like to see and how would you like to help us? It sounds simple, but I see it as a big shift in attitude and perspective. Nevertheless, for museums, scaling up digitization efforts to achieve cost efficiencies and handle large quantities has been difficult, if not impossible. So this is the real challenge that faced the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian collections are mind-boggling. 137 million objects, of which 124 million are natural history specimens. You can see other statistics on this slide. After a long period of cross-institution data gathering, an analysis brought the number of items that would really benefit potential users through digitization down to 14 million. Still an enormous number to contemplate. A survey determined that there were 200 priority projects across the institution that would require 10 million acts of digitization to accomplish. The investment required to complete this in a 3-year period would be extensive in terms of dollars, staffing, and space. But one has to start somewhere. To achieve rapid capture became a high development priority. So for the balance of my talk, I want to quickly show Smithsonian progress in this area. Still experimental, but definitely achieving even greater results than had been hoped. Well, what is rapid capture? It's more than just taking a digital picture of an object. It requires a comprehensive look at the entire cycle of work that has to take place, from removing an object from a storage shelf to making an image and accompanying information available to the public. The Smithsonian decided to begin a series of pilot projects for different units being the general term for a Smithsonian museum or library or archive or any other office, using different objects. Those covered so far included glass plate negatives from the Smithsonian Gardens collection, photographs from the new National Museum of African American History and Culture, paper currency from the National Museum of American History, Asian pottery from the Freer and Sackler Galleries of Art, and bumblebees from the National Museum of Natural History. The goal in each case was to provide full access to the object image in less than 24 hours from the time the object left the shelf. The pilots showed that for two-dimensional objects, such as the glass plate negatives, the historical paper currency, and photographs, if there was at least some metadata in the relevant collection inventory system, very high level output could be achieved with steady work from 100,000 to 1.8 million images per year. The basic steps were to find a way to prepare the objects by creating special holders of the same dimension that could be run under the camera quickly. Not that kind of camera. But retain the same image quality, creating software with a standardized record input that could move from the camera through the rest of the data cycle, adding information both keyed in and automatically drawn from existing records, sending images and record to the Smithsonian Transcription Center for external volunteers to transcribe descriptive labels and add relevant tags, then loading the images and metadata into both the museum system and the collection search center for public use. In some cases, once the image was captured, this could happen in minutes. Of course, there are quality control steps along the way. Now, the Smithsonian Transcription Center, which is also a new operation, can handle many kinds of transcription, all of it crowdsourced, such as this notebook from an archive, or a herbarium label, with a quality control step, review step built in as needed. For the historic paper currency at the American History Museum, here are the steps. So the currency comes from the mint, and it's in these sheets of 4 or 5 bills before they had been cut. So they're the proof sheets from the mint. Okay, so from the item, which are in these storage boxes, to scanning, and to the transcription center. The top item on that bottom view says certified proofs of Alabama currency. The record shows that there were 165 sheets of currency in the box, and 18 external volunteers added the rest of the information from the labels by using a template. The quality of the scan is very, very high. Hopefully not too high that a forger could come along. But what about those 124 million natural history specimens? The current pilot focuses on bumblebees, or bombus is the genus, that already exist pinned in boxes with tiny labels attached to each pin. Volunteers take each bee, remove the labels, pin the bee into custom-made containers, spread out the labels. The boxes are then quickly and smoothly placed under the camera. And as each image appears on the screen, another staff member pulls up a template that draws in rudimentary information about each bee from the existing collection information system, which is called EMU. This is all, so that may be what it says when it's on its way to the transcription center. So you can see the bee, you can see all the labels that have been spread out on the box, and that's all the information at that point that exists about the bee. So then it is sent to the transcription center, where external volunteers transcribe the labels, again using a template. While there are certainly staff involved at every phase, the pilot shows that the software which creates the templates and draws all the information together automatically, as well as standardizing the boxes so that the B and the labels are in the same focal plane used by the camera, speeds up the process dramatically. And again, the quality of the scans is quite remarkable. And you can go to those Facebook and Twitter to see more information. Throughput is much higher than originally thought in all the pilots. With the Bs, it averaged well over 6,000 images a day. I'm sure it's not been lost on you that what I've described, though, is still a very human-driven system. But what if more of this human-driven process could be automated? Well, there are already conveyor systems on the market that could speed up this process even more. We don't have one yet, but I understand that we may get one in order to try that out. One of the more exciting initiatives at the Smithsonian is its work in 3D imaging, which allows a whole new way of looking at objects, as you know, that can be even better than viewing them behind glass in an exhibition case. The Smithsonian's 3D unit is experimenting with all kinds of 3D applications, starting with simple scanning. That's the main website for it. Starting from simple scanning of a small object on a table to a whale graveyard in Chile that was being destined to be buried under a highway project in just a few days. Of course, you can then do marvelous things in a 3D viewer. Here is an entire mammoth skeleton, which 3D imagery can make turn. In 1903, the Franken Orville Wright Flyer became the first powered heavier-than-air machine to achieve controlled sustained flight with a pilot aboard. It can be made to fly, or an entire boat can be scanned and made to maneuver. These slides make it clear that it's labor-intensive to scan in 3D. But what if there were conveyor belt 3D scanners? Well, there are, and they're coming on the market. So I think you'll agree that these slides show how it is becoming possible for all kinds of museums to image the collections for their own products or contribute to digital repositories where anyone can become a curator and create products that can provide a more complete view of our cultural and intellectual past by including material culture. There are many other overlaps of interest theory, issues, training, as we heard yesterday, and the need for advocacy, even more important, which can lead to fruitful collaborations among museums, libraries, and archives. But the professions behind libraries, archives, and museums are likely to remain distinct, while their collections converge in the minds of those who see them in more holistic ways. In other words, the collections of many LAM collaborators converge into singular products. I want to thank all these people who helped me with the slides. I think you'll agree that it's a very exciting time for us all in the digital world. Thank you. I have to say that in the paper yesterday, I think, I read that it is now possible with 3D imaging to see a complete circle of a complete circumference of an object, even if you haven't scanned the whole circumference. Don't ask me how, but then I thought, well, these are pretty simple compared with what you really can do out there. But nevertheless, it does create a dimension that I think is exciting for everybody who's in the digital world. I'm very happy to take any questions that you might have. Oh, I see lots of hands. That's great. So there are microphones coming around. Let's start there.
My name is Takashi. Takashi has come from Japan. I'm very impressed with your speech, and so great job has been done. But my question, I have also digitalized all the books in Japan and loading up the webs at the time. So many programs there are. And what audience you are targeting is very important for that you are digitalized and correction loading up to the webs. At the time, the audience is very different. There are so many kind of the audience there are. At the time, how to showing to the audience is so many ways there are. At the time, I'm very difficulty how to the more broad audience. It's not so easy to understanding the details of each of the corrections. It's a very important thing. I'm very detailed explanation adding to the correction and the old book in Japan at the time, and also adding to the very detailed explanation to the English and Japanese, both of the languages. How do you approaching from detailed explanation to the more broader audience to your question?
Okay, I'm not quite sure I understood the question.
Yeah. You are digitalize all of the correction. It's a very great job. But the explanation of each of the corrections, not so much details. My understanding, yeah.
There's not much detail.
Not so much details in each of the correction explanation in your correction.
Levels of category.
Yeah. It depends on the audience. It's so much different too.
All right.
Yeah.
How do you fit the needs of the audience? This is the problem, because it depends on the level of details you adopt for your speech.
So how do we gauge the need of the audience in terms of the level of detail that they want?
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
I guess so.
It's very important for so many corrections digitalizing on the web. It's a very important.
I think there are two things going on.
Okay.
One is that we're predicting the audience being the world, okay? So how much detail any one of those people needs is going to vary tremendously.
Yes.
What we're trying to do, though, is to get out as much as we can with the information that we have. Sometimes with an object, we may have a huge amount of information. And remember that once you see the image, it sends you back to the repository where the image came from. And in that collection information system may reside a whole lot more detail on any one object, or not. But that at least is a first step in terms of finding out if there's any more about the object. Then you at least know where the object is located, and if you want more information about it, you can contact the repository where it exists. So we're really leaving it up to the public to decide how much information they want once they see an object. There'll be a lot with it, maybe, or maybe not, but at least they'll know the path to go find out more.
Yeah, thank you. I understand. I understand to the much correction going to the data is very important to approaching to the broader audiences. The another aspect to the more details, more deep explanation for the another kind of audiences. It's maybe the necessary to.
Just remember, this is just a first step. It's first of all to expose what you've got, and then the detail can come later. So if you don't mind, we can move on to one of the other questioners, and we can talk more about that later at the break.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I know there were some other hands here.
I'm Takashi Koga from Ten University, Japan. Thank you very much for your presentation. My question is simple. Does any LMM collaboration occur among the overall LMM institutions in DC area beyond the Smithsonian?
Is anybody doing this in the DC area beyond the Smithsonian?
Yes,
not to my knowledge. But remember, we have 19 museums, and while they're not all in the DC area, that's a lot of museums in DC.
I found very interesting your presentation, and I have two questions. One is about the software platform you use for displaying digital objects to users, whether it is an house-made platform or a commercial software platform. And the second question is about descriptive metadata schemas. Do you use a single metadata for different objects, whether museums, libraries, etc., or specific schemas for useful for each specific kind of object?
Okay, I'll do my best here. I'm not the technical guru, and I'm presenting what I know from a layperson's point of view. The software that is being used to develop the templates and gather in the information is one that has been developed by our IT office, the Smithsonian's IT office. All of that's going to be put up and available as an open access. In fact, all that we're doing for the museum object imaging, all of the stuff that goes with that is going to be put up in an open access place, like GitHub or someplace, eventually, once they have worked out all the kinks. So it'll be available to anybody. So what schema are we using for the metadata? Well, let's see, I will do my best here as best as I understand it. Each of the collection inventory systems that the original data is being pulled out of, this one called EMU in the Natural History Museum, there's TMS, the museum system for several of the other art museums. It's the Circe Dynex Horizon system for the archives and the libraries. The Collection Search Center is an interface that was built on top of that to enable mapping of the data from all of those different systems. So that's the schema we're using derives from that interface. And then the templates that are developed are specifically developed with fields that relate to whatever the unit wants to have in there, basically. But it's all probably Darwin Core with something else. And I'm sorry, but that's probably all I know at the moment. However, I can probably guide you to the right person to tell you about that if you would like. So just get me at the break.
I had just sorry, Federica. I like last sentence in the last slide. Many collaborators, convergence in product. which is an evolution of the OCLC figure of different
Yeah, I was
steps.
looking for rivers that converge, because whenever you use that word, that's what it says to me. It's like two rivers converging into one, and I don't really see that happening except in the products that all of these repositories are putting together, at least in the US. Now, I was very taken with the example of the training that is happening at the University of Zagreb. We were talking later and saying, wouldn't it be wonderful if a small country that had limited resources was going to need to invent something entirely new and really bring these cultural entities together, because in a place like the US, we are so solid in our silos of professionalism with archives, museums, and libraries, that while we collaborate on lots of things, I don't see any real convergence beyond the ability now to bring our holdings together in a way that that a user or curator can make use of them. But I was very heartened by hearing about that experiment, and I hope there are going to be more of those. There's a reason why those three entities, why they develop separately, just like the sciences developed into different fields and other things developed into different specialties. They wouldn't have if they didn't each have something unique about them that is different. It doesn't mean that a manager can't manage. We have, as someone mentioned yesterday, David Ferriero is the librarian, but he's the archivist of the United States. He tells me when he first went there, his staff told him he couldn't do it because he wasn't an archivist. It looks to me like he's been doing a fine job. But that's, at a high level. When you get down into the weeds, there are very different approaches to the kinds of holdings that you have, and there's a reason for that. So the more we understand about each of those, the more we can operate across in various ways. But I'm not sure we should worry too much about convergence otherwise. There was a question over here. By the way, if anybody can find a really good, better slide for a river system that converges, that can be blown up and not pixelate, I'd like to know about it.
Hi, I'm Federica Riva from the Conservatory of Music in Florence. And I've understood you don't have a pilot project on music. I would like to know if you have music in all those many, I suppose, yes? And did I understood about what you said, the University of Zagreb, that you will be happy to make a pilot project with another country, perhaps, the heritage of another country, like to be a service for us, Professor?
Oh, don't I wish. Personally, yes, but officially, I think we have enough to do with our 134 million objects. Music. Well, of course we have music. We have lots of musical instruments in the collection, including Stradivarius's, and there's our own in-house quartet, and we have our in-house jazz orchestra. And there are large, especially jazz collections. The Duke Ellington Archive is in the Museum of American History. Even in the libraries, because I can never make a generalization about the Smithsonian, for which I can't find a couple of exceptions. We have a sheet music collection called the Bella Landauer Sheet Music Collection in the Air and Space Museum, and it's all sheet music that has a flying theme. They've got wonderful covers of flying machines. A lot of it's from the early age of flight when it was such a romantic idea and songwriters were writing all kinds of songs. I think we even have some of those covers digitized, and probably they can be found on our website. So yes, there's a lot of music in the institution. Any other questions? Yes, in the back. Way in the back.
Good morning, I am Carlotta Margarone. I am the digital media curator of the Fondazione Torinesi. And I have a question for you about Google that you mentioned this morning. I am experiencing now problems with our catalogs of the children museums because we have no funds to do practically nothing. And now Google is offering me the possibility to do a lot of things for free. You know, 3D scanning, megapixel photos, and open galleries, and so on. But I am concerned because I am giving my data, my photos to Google. So I would like to know, what do you think about this Google cultural project? Thank you.
Oh yes. Well, I personally think that there is no such thing as a free lunch. Nevertheless, Google has done a lot of good work, and I think you just need to be very careful about what you would be getting back and your ability to use whatever that is. So will you be getting back the digital files? Will they be in a form that you can use? Will you be allowed to use them? Not only for your internal purposes, but to make any of those things available to the public. If you can't do it immediately, is there an embargo period? How long is the embargo period before you could make it available? All of those kinds of things are things you would want to work out with any vendor, Google or anybody else. We are now involved with Gail Cengage in a large digitizing effort on 2 of our collections. One has to do with World's Fairs all over the world. We have a huge collection of World's Fair literature. The other has to do with what we call trade catalogs. These are catalogs that manufacturers produced for salesmen and companies to use to buy products to sell in the period between 1850 and about 1950 maybe. These were the main ways that manufacturers got their products out. And we have 500,000 of these items. These are huge collections that we would never be able to get the resources to do ourselves. Gail Cengage is doing them for us, again, quote unquote, absolutely free. In addition to the scanning, they paid for staff for packing. They paid for 2 book conservators to review the stuff to make sure it was safely done. They're doing all the metadata for each item, which we didn't have. And they're putting them into collections, which they're going to sell for subscription as they do their other collections. We will get all the digital files, we'll get all the metadata, and the embargo period for us to use it is relatively short, so that we can put them up as long as we don't try to create the same kind of product that they are. And we wouldn't want to, because we're going to get royalties from the sales of the subscriptions. So go home and tell your libraries about all this. I'm sure you'll want these collections. But we really worked on that contract to make sure that we had rights in the material, that we were going to get all of the product, that we were going to have the ability to make use of the files and to make them public and to be able to share and all of that. As long as you do that, I think you'll be on safe ground. And meantime, there's almost no other way we're going to get some of this work done, to be quite honest. Okay, I think I'm being told we're done. Thank you. You've been a great audience.
Just in the introducing this session, I would like to say that we have received many good papers for the conference, the satellite. But unfortunately, we were able to select only 9 of them. For the paper we were considered very good, we invited the speaker to do a poster. For recognition of the good quality also of the poster, we decided to plan this poster session with the possibility of very, very short presentation by the author of the main message of the poster. The coordinator of the poster session, also the best poster selection, has been Maurizio Vivarelli of the University of Turin, and I give to him the floor. Thank you, Maurizio.
Good morning. Now we have about half an hour for this poster session to present very quickly the poster admitted to the conference that you can see in this side of the hall. First of all, however, I want to remember that today is a special day for one of us. Today, in fact, today is the birthday of Anna Maria Tamar. And so I am sure to interpret the feelings of all of us doing Anna Maria our best wishes. Happy birthday, buon compleanno, Anna Maria. Also the song. Well, we are in delay and... scusa. We are in delay and we must be very fast. Now I would like to recall the names of the members of the jury that examined the posters. In addition to me, these are the members of the jury whom I thank for their keen availability. Patricia Overall, Serap Kurbanoglu, Heidi Kristin Olsen, Kristina Matusiak, Takushi Nagatsuka, Jules Simon. In all, I think 8 posters have been presented. And now I invite the authors for a very short presentation of the main concept of their posters. And we can begin with Elisabetta Bruno, who is the author of the poster Creating Knowledge Through Innovative Approaches and Applications.
Thank you. The concept of cultural heritage underwent a highly significant change in the last few years. One of the most evident signs of this change is the convergence of different professional skills. This change has been marked by the passage from mere documentation and preservation of cultural heritage to considering information involved into any kind of cultural heritage as a source of a new knowledge. A cultural good is not only something to preserve or to exploit, but a source of information. This source is multiple, integrated, related, and relatable. Therefore, differentiated and demanding users can access to it. Documentation itself is changing according to the kind of research made by different users. For example, Google navigation or scholar research. Our host IFLA describes its missions as representing the interests of librarian services, information services, and users at the same time. Significantly, the subtitle of the trend report of the IFLA published in July 2013 says, Navigating the Evolving Information Environment. The report gives us a lot of news. It gives the chance to reason about both the quantity of information transmitted and the kind of digital information created in the last decade. Thus, it is evident that the relevance of digital heritage requires new approaches and management. One of the novelties is the convergence of professional skills. New job profiles as digital curator, content editor, cultural manager, data manager, collection manager, requests all over the world can illustrate what I mean. These profiles combine the constantly updated expertise of specialized fields with necessary managerial skills requested by cultural operators. Only this synergy can develop innovative applications and tools from which new forms of knowledge can stem, thanks to the integration of different fields of cultural documentation. The real innovative approach is to consider both technologies and cultural goods as sources. Different professionals have to lead this new form of knowledge. New technologies are both instruments of representation and a chance of inspiration. Synapse project has been developed departing from this background analysis, and it is the result of cooperation of heritage COPAT and GAP companies with DigiLab, the research interdepartmental center of the University of Rome, La Sapienza. Synapse is a completely web-based system whose purpose is to manage, share, and relate complex data and datasets. The innovative focus is the synergy between the compliance with standard data structures in sectors related to archives, libraries, arts, museums, and the new requirements of cultural heritage preservation and valorization. In particular, the system allows extreme flexibility in structuring data through specific standardized or customized templates. These features make Synapse an extremely flexible and dynamic tool, suitable for the development of multi-standard integration system for descriptive information. Thus, interoperability, usability, international potentiality, and ongoing implementation are Synapse's main features and are part of its senior nature. To guarantee full interoperability and total access, we are developing research action about open and linked data. The innovative potentialities of Synapse project perfectly match the undergoing changes of cultural heritage at present time. This innovation includes the construction of dialogue and synergy between institutions and privates. This future seems to be the perfect answer to the more and more massive requirement of communication and communication sharing at any level and among all aforementioned actors. Thank you.
Thanks to Elisabetta Bruno. The second poster has the title, The DigiCurve Curriculum Framework for Digital Curation. The authors are Chiara Cirinna and Maurizio Lunghi, and they are not present this morning. And the presentation of the poster will be made by Carla Colombati.
The DigiCur curriculum framework, the Digital Curator Vocational Education project, founded by the European Commission's Leonardo da Vinci program, began in January 2011 and lasted until June 2013. The aim of the project was to establish a curriculum framework from which vocational education and training in digital curation can be developed. The project has a particular focus on the training needed to develop the new skills and competencies that are essential for staff working with digital collection in the library, archive, museum, and cultural heritage sector for the long-term management of digital content. Digital curation has an increasingly important role to play in a range of market sectors, not least of which is the cultural heritage sector. Supporting the professional development of digital curators across the sector is a priority in maintaining the quality of service delivered by the organizations that rely on digital curation. The Digital Curation Vocation Curriculum Framework draws on knowledge, expertise, and research developed within digital curator vocation and related initiatives in order to synthesize a matrix of core digital curation skills and competencies, and, where appropriated, pathways of skills progression between one type of professional role and another. At the core of the framework lies the recognition that digital curation is a complex profession. So this curriculum framework provides multiple lenses onto digital curation, one each for staff engaged as executives, managers, and practitioners. Each of the lenses can be used to develop, evaluate, and plan training and professional development for staff engaged in the digital curation across multiple sectors. To address the full scope of digital curation activities, this curriculum framework encompasses a wide range of skills, arranged into a hierarchy of domains and subdomains in order that users may either examine the full scope of digital curation activities or drill down into the skill associated with a specific areas of interest. Okay, thank you.
So the third poster has the title Theory and Practicing Convergence, MAB Tuscany. The authors are Ilaria Della Monica, Silvia Bruni, and Anna Maria Tammaro. The presentation will be made, I think, by Ilaria Della Monica.
Good morning. I'm Ilaria Della Monica. I am the archivist of the Biblioteche Berenson, Villa Itatti, the Harvard University Center for Italian Renaissance Studies, but I'm here as coordinator of MAB Tuscany. MAB, an acronym for the coordination of Italian Association for Libraries and for Archives and Italic section of ICOM, has been found in 2011 following an initiative launched by Piemonte. MAB is organized in regional standing committees, and now is starting to explore the practice of convergence and the theory and the practice of convergence among these different professions. MAB Tuscany, 1 year old, is organized in 3 working groups, one for language, one for projects, and the third for education. The working group language aims to integrate different schemas for improving resource discovery. It has developed an interoperability schema focusing on semantic web. The working group project aims to realize common MAB project. As a sandbox, it's now trying to work a project regarding 1966 Florentine flood, an event in which the cultural heritage was completely involved without any distinctions. The education and training working group, for which we had the fortune to have Anna Maria as coordinator from its beginning, design and share learning events and courses for common educational needs. A calendar of workshops had been realized focusing on 2 themes of common interest: conservation of cultural heritage and linked open data and semantic web. The format of the workshops include the introduction by 3 teachers coming from the field of museum, archives, and libraries, and after a group discussion about common strategies and activity for MAB. This poster will focus on the challenges evidenced in the first year of MAB Tuscany activity. And these are: we lack a common understanding of fundamentals and a cultural heritage theory. The notion of cultural object is not very clear. Is it information? Is it a document? Is it a resource? And so, the mission of the profession, is it conservation? It is discovery and access, or facilitating knowledge creation. From the other side, we lack an information and communication technology updated competencies and skills, and as a consequence, often the computer scientists are those involved in designing MAB institution application. Another point to be underlined is that the 3 profession, education background and experiences, are certainly at a different level of competencies, as we saw also in the speech before. We need education for the convergence and integration of the best characteristics of the 3 professions, and perhaps new profession as digital curator are to be developed. A third point is that there is a need for an institutional support and financement to promote this kind of coordination. Perhaps, and so, national, local, area financement would be needed to stimulate the cooperation between the 3 professions. At the end, we need to collaborate with European similar experiences and plan proposal for European project. European cultural project findings should be diffused, and MAB could be a partner in the future. Thank you.
Thanks to Ilaria Della Monica, and the next poster is as a title, Library and Museum, a World of Collections. The author is Giovanna Montano.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody, participants at the Congress and organizers. Sorry, first of all, sorry for my English with a strong Italian accent. I try to do my best. And the title, the right title of the poster is Museum and Library Between Proximity and Distance, Transmission of Knowledge and Comparison, as you've seen. Briefly, I present this poster, and the first question that for me was important to think about, to suppose, when I decided to work with this poster, was why speak of proximity and distance in the constant context of museums and libraries. The answer is beyond the complex history that links this institution through the centuries till now. My purpose wasn't to describe the story, that however is too much long, but to analyze how some fundamental steps changed the institution and the profession of the two ancient fields that would to preserving and providing access to knowledge, but quite always used two different approaches. Firstly, I think it's important to remember the historic divergence, so different place in our social and informational space, a different nature of collection, and a consequent developing of distinct technique linked to the management of collection. But the word proximity takes more relevance thanks to the massive works of Paul Outlet and Henri de La Fontaine, before in Belgium and then around the world. And the Outlet revolution could be resumed with one phrase: all these materials can be considered information. And this modern view became a real project with the Mundaneum that opened its door in 1910. And now is presented like the precursor of Google, about the dream of its creator that all information could be accessed by people from the comfort of their home. In the last 2 decades, museum and library as institution lived an interesting new political interest, are shapers of the future society. And this was the beginning of a new series of collaboration in a phase not simple, because media and people spoken about the death of museum or the death of library. But this crossroad, this important crossroad, gives life to a big entity like the American IMLS, Institute of Museum and Library Service, the English MLA, Museum, Library and Archive Council, and the European Europeana. But what about today? What about the actual situation, the actual convergence? We can recognize a new profession that is breaking out the traditional monumental walls and use everyday new instrument. The social media, for example, recognize a new participation, because people that share opinion, experience and perspective could be active involved to contribute to the collection by the crowdsourcing. I think, for example, to the Library of New York or the British Library. There are a lot of examples. And we can find also the appearance of the semantic web, which definition is not easy, but we can speak about it like an integrator across different content, information, application, and system, with application in publishing, blogging, and many other areas. So the information object from library and museum are linked to each other via their shared data elements and a new digital mediation. And this convergence is not to be intended linked to the content or the service, but to a professional attitude, a new step in the practice of the job, the relationship with the user, that is also the most important. And at the end, the digital curation is the real point of common that concerns museum and library. If you are interested to more, there is a website about this poster, where is the source and the bibliography, and where you can download the poster that you see inside this room. Thank you.
Thank you to Giovanna Montano. And now Federica Riva. The title of the poster is Music Libraries, Archives, Documentation Centers, museums, strengths and the theoretical foundations for convergence in music.
Hello to everybody. Thanks very much for this opportunity you gave to me. As you see, my poster actually has a shorter title. And I'm music librarian at the Conservatory of Music in Florence, and I'm actually president of the Italian branch of the International Association of Music Libraries, Archives, and Documentation Centers, which is contemporary music, which was founded in 1951. That means that for us, there is no problem about convergence, because in music, things have never been divided. So at some point, any education you have as music librarian, you need to deal every day with these things. So we are an alternative approach to the problem of convergence. That's one of my main points. And why I did the poster? Because I would like to share with you not only what we are, and this is something I would like you to know, but some ideas I had, and I would like your feedback on these ideas, because from our point of view, lots of elements are the same, of course, because we are in the same world. But I would like to add another element, which I really didn't hear in these 2 days. Are you sure we will have any professionals in the future? Because in Italy, we don't have any development, and people get retired, and we have no people taking the place. Why? Because the profession is changing. We were a state profession, and there will be no state profession in the future. So what we think, and I think for young people coming up, is they don't need only to be good professionals for the content of what to do. So they have to know music, they have to know librarianship, or all development, big data, and so and so. They need first to know how to manage their profession, are independent professionals. So I will add just one idea to this that we will find on the poster. What's the roles of economics inside the curricula of the new profession, any kind of curriculum? Because if we don't teach to young people how to manage a profession, we won't have a profession anymore. So the role of economics inside the curricula is my idea, and then you will find my cards near the posters, and please, thank you if you want to leave yours.
Well, thanks to Federica Riva, and now Goran Trajlovic, the title Cooperation of Libraries, Archives and Museums.
My name is Goran Trajlovic. I work in Pančevo City Library, and I'm some kind of communication officer. I am the chief of the department of publishing and so on. And we have a very good library journal. You can find us on this Civiche RS. The name of this poster may be Virtual Pančevo, VIP, maybe cooperation of libraries, archives, and museums, or hand-in-hand museums and libraries working together. It isn't my title, you know. And maybe the never-ending story, and I'll tell you why. And little background, the Pančevo City Library has been promoting cooperation of heritage institutions and digitalization for years through Civiche, and the scientific journal of theory and practice of librarianship, and at the end of the last year it tried the issue of digitization in the local framework by promoting a digital atlas of the cultural heritage of Serbia. By the VIP project, the library wants to encourage the digitization process and to create a portal that will unite all individual presentations in the city, a portal with friendly environment, modern, interactive, functional, and searchable, easy to search. We maybe mentioned this poster. We try to put very complex story on this paper. It will be harder to, it will be not easy to do on the portal. Pančevo in Serbia, near Belgrade, the view from the river, and Pančevo has a lot of very interesting and very valuable old buildings in this old industrial zone along the river. Some of them are not in very good condition, like this Wyfred Brewery, but some of them are in very, very good. And my favorites are these lighthouses, two vacant houses at the confluence of the Tamiš River and the Danube, built in 1999 at the time of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and they are only surviving pair of lighthouses on the entire course of the Danube, I suppose, in Europe. Why never-ending story? In the Idle Point, we shall encompass all manifestations of the city in real life. At the intersection of historical verticals and the present moment, with some futuristic projection and possible parallel realities, as well as facilities and appearances which no longer exist since they disappeared without a trace in time behind us. Ovako tempo passat. In the initial phase, special attention of the creators is directed to the conceptual, technical, structural aspects of the project, and by the end of this year we plan to set up initial version of the IP. Somebody mentions feedback. I will be very happy to talk about this project. I'm in the garden when I'm smoking, and I'll be very ready to talk about this, journal and maybe this project. Thank you.
Well, and now the last poster. The title is Integrated Systems of Discovery Services and Authority Files as Convergence Platforms for Archives, Libraries and Museums. The authors, Antonella Trombone and Simona Turbanti.
Good morning to everybody. I am Simona Turbanti, and in this poster, Antonella and I, we have tried to trace a route of cooperation among the three cultural heritage communities through common rules and joint projects for the cataloging of the authors. Talking about convergence among archives, library, and museum, it is deeply clear that the three communities codify and decodify their resource for the web using different standards and different tools. Moreover, the fruition method of a resource codified by the three communities show distinct aims: the use in archives and the libraries, and the sensory fruition in museum, thought in any case with the purpose of cultural enrichment. We believe that a synergy among LAMs is possible. Probably it is the time to pursue a common pathway for cooperation. Potential users of LAM's collection are waiting for accessibility to information world, starting from an online unified search. Even if RDA, resource description and access, has tried to provide a unique tool for resource description for these three communities, at the moment it is simply hard a common adoption of the new Anglo-American rules. However, a need is emerging to use common database and rules for information shared by the three communities as the authors. Regarding the data concerning authors, even though a unified database for library, archives, and museum doesn't exist yet, we can imagine probably its fulfillment. And now we can just cite some of the major standards and projects that Antonella and io have examined.
Talking about the archives, the social network and archival context project started in 2010 is an aggregate, a biographical information about people, both individuals and groups, who created or are documented in historical resources. User can search for names or individual people, organizations, and families, browse feature description, and discover and locate connected historical resources. The SNAC data contributors are Virtual International Authority File, the Getting Union list of artist names, Library of Congress Name Authority File, OCLC WordCat. In Italy, the Integrated Catalogue of Museum of Modern Art of Trento and Rovereto gives access to its funds and documents also through authors and subjects, for whom chronological and biographical notes or institutional history are available. The Italian archival rules, NIERA, for persons, families, and organizations, make explicit reference also to the National Cataloging Rules, REICAT, as a logical and content model. At the same time, SBN Authority Records, a service offered by the Italian National Library Service, starting from 2009, takes part to VIAF with the personal author records. As regards museums, the Getty Research Institute vocabularies, now also available as linked open data, are a reference point for the international community. The vocabularies comply with national and international standards for vocabulary constructions and also map to resource description and access, and also to describe in the archives a content standard, DAX. One of them, the Union List of Artist Names, is a member of VIAF and interacts with Library of Congress authorities. The Italian Central Institute for Cataloging and Documentation started collaborating in 1999 with the International Terminology Working Group of the Getty Research Institute. University of Venice is another Italian partner. The European project Athena, among its main results, has the testing of the standard LIDO, lightweight information describing objects. It is the first international standard aimed at the interoperability of museum descriptions, a collaboration of European and American museums. The challenge of interoperability among heterogeneous systems is still open. Even if the museum's world doesn't seem plenty of rules and standards as the other two communities, it looks clear that the author's name description is an example of convergence, and that the three communities are already working together, interacting through common projects and sharing information. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Well, now we are in delay, but before the communication of the winner, I only want to use one moment to express my thanks to all those who have contributed to the organization of this initiative. And particularly, I would like to express my thanks to the students and the volunteers who have contributed to this organization. And exactly, Chiara Vieiren, Maria Gabriella Stuardi, Paola Gisolo, Martina Grange, Alessandra Conta, Bruno Farinelli, Alessia Gubernati, Giulia Tedesco, Samantha Wolf, Linda Quasso and Elia Morandi. And now I want to say that the jury representing the IFLA Professional Committee has reviewed all the posters, basing its activity on the specific criteria, and it has chosen the winner, really the winners of this session of IFLA Poster 2014. And the winner are, not the winner is, the winner are Chiara Cirinna and Maurizio Lunghi for the poster, the DigiCurve. There is another title, but I have extracted this from the program, the DigiCurve Curriculum Framework for Digital Curation, and I invite Carla Colombati for the award. And the other poster is Library and Museum, a World of Collections by Giovanna Montano.